On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, you never expect your world to end. Not while doing something as simple as walking your dog in your own neighborhood. But for some people, power is like a drug. And when that power is unchecked, it destroys everything in its path. We will soon see what this power is capable of. For Daniel Carter, this destruction happened at 3:47 p.m. on a sunny autumn day. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the suburban street. Daniel walked with determined steps, his German Shepherd Atlas moving in perfect harmony beside him, never straying from the path. The leash dangled loosely in his hand. It wasn't really necessary, because Atlas had been trained to military standards. The dog knew every command, responded to the slightest movement, and had saved Daniel's life more than once in places most people only saw on the news. Atlas was an incredibly well-trained dog, but neither Atlas nor Daniel knew what was coming. Daniel was 38 years old, very dark-skinned, thin but strong, and possessed a quiet confidence gained from 15 years in the Delta Force, the world's most elite combat unit. Counter-terrorism, hostage rescue, operations so secret he couldn't even tell his own family where he was or what he was doing. Daniel had once been a professional soldier, but he wasn't anymore. He had retired 6 months ago, moved to this quiet neighborhood, and tried to build something resembling a normal life, but normal felt foreign to him. After years of serving in war zones, the silence of the suburbs felt almost suspicious to him. He was always seeking action. Most mornings, he woke up screaming from nightmares. Still, he tried. He ran in the mornings. He went for walks with Atlas in the afternoons. He made small talk with neighbors who didn't know what he did for his country, and never would. Maybe this way, he could get used to civilian life. Today seemed like any other day, until the police car slowed down beside him. Daniel kept walking, his eyes fixed ahead. He knew this game. He'd played it before. This was definitely a familiar situation for him. The police car matched his pace. Then the window rolled down. "Good morning," said a voice. It wasn't friendly. It was just there. Daniel stopped and turned calmly. "Good morning, officers," he replied. There were 2 of them. The driver was Officer Greg Calloway, white, in his early 40s, with a face that probably smiled from childhood. His partner, Officer Tony Miller, got out of the passenger side door. He was younger, maybe in his mid-30s, but had the same energy. "Do you live around here?" Calloway asked, leaning against the window frame. "Yes, sir. 2 blocks away," Daniel replied. "Strange. I don't think I've seen you before," Officer Gregg said. Daniel nodded politely. "I mostly keep to myself. I moved here a few months ago," he replied. Miller walked around the front of the car and stopped a few meters away, close enough to intimidate, far enough to claim innocence. "What's with the dog?" Miller asked, his eyes fixed on Atlas, German Shepherd. "His name is Atlas," said Daniel. "Big dog. Is he trained?" asked Miller. "Yes, sir." "Very well trained," replied Daniel again. Miller gave a mocking smile. "What for? Protection?" he asked dismissively. Daniel kept his tone steady. "Obedience. Discipline. A good dog," he said. Daniel always tried to remain calm, knowing what could happen to him. But the police officers, on the contrary, were putting even more pressure on him. Calloway leaned forward slightly. "We received a report of someone acting suspiciously in this area. Wandering around, looking into houses," he said. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm just walking my dog," he said. He understood what they were implying. "Of course, but you understand. We have to check these things," Calloway said. "I understand. Would you like to see my ID?" Daniel asked. Calloway exchanged glances with Miller. "Yes, let's start with that," they said. Daniel slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his wallet. He handed over his driver's license. Calloway barely glanced at the license before handing it to Miller. "Daniel Carter," Miller read. "Are you a soldier?" he asked. "Retired," Daniel replied. "Which branch?" the officers asked again. "Army," he answered. "What did you do?" They began asking more detailed questions. Daniel paused. "Infantry, overseas assignments," he replied. This wasn't entirely true, but it was enough. The real situation, Delta Force, covert operations, missions that didn't appear in any public records, wasn't something he would share with anyone, least of all police looking for an excuse. Miller returned the license. "Infantry, huh? You don't look like infantry," he said. Daniel said nothing. Calloway got out of the car and joined his partner. "Let's get this straight. You're an ex-soldier. You just moved here. Nobody knows you, and you're walking around with a trained attack dog," he said. He didn't seem convinced. "He's not an attack dog. He's a friend," Daniel replied. "He looks pretty aggressive to me," Calloway said. Atlas hadn't moved. He sat calmly beside Daniel, his eyes fixed straight ahead, completely still. There was no aggression in him. Being trained, he would never act without Daniel's command. "He's completely calm," Daniel said quietly. "For now," said Miller, taking a step closer. "What if he gets scared? What if someone walks by and he perceives them as a threat?" he asked. Daniel's voice remained steady, but there was steel-like determination beneath it. Atlas is trained to the highest standards. He only responds to my commands. He poses no threat to anyone, he said, trying to control the situation but feeling uneasy. He sensed that bigger problems were coming. They all say that, Calloway muttered. Right before someone gets torn apart, he continued. Daniel exhaled slowly. He could sense the situation had changed. It wasn't about the dog. It wasn't about security. It was about control. It was about two men in uniform who disliked his appearance, his attitude, his refusal to be intimidated. The police thought they could scare him, but nothing went as they expected. The only thing that mattered to them was their own egos, and how much they could humiliate and belittle Daniel. Officers, I'm just trying to walk my dog. I haven't broken any laws. If you have a specific complaint, I'm happy to hear it, said Daniel. If you were in Daniel's place, could you remain so calm? Or how would you react? Calloway's smirk widened. You know what? I think we need to take a closer look at that dog. We need to make sure its license, vaccinations, everything is in order, he said. Since the police couldn't get what they wanted from Daniel, this time they wanted to use the dog to cause trouble. Because they thought this would allow them to arrest him. Daniel's pulse quickened, but his voice remained calm. Atlas's license and vaccinations are in order. All the paperwork is at home. I can bring it to the station tomorrow if necessary, he replied. Tomorrow? Miller laughed. No, we need to see it now, he said. The opportunity he wanted had presented itself. They could use the fact that the paperwork wasn't with him. I don't have them with me, Daniel said. Then we have a problem, said the police officers. Daniel's hand tightened slightly on the leash. Atlas sensed the change immediately. His ears pricked up, his body tensed slightly. He was still calm, he was still under control. But he was aware. He could attack at the slightest movement. All Daniel had to do was give the order. No problem, Daniel said firmly. I am a law-abiding citizen. I am happy to cooperate, but I will not be harassed, he defended himself. Calloway's face darkened. Harassment? You think this is harassment? He asked. I think you're unnecessarily escalating the situation, Daniel replied. Miller had now approached, his hand drifting toward his belt. Watch how you talk to us, buddy. We're just doing our job, he said. I'm just walking my dog, Daniel repeated. Not anymore, Calloway said, pulling out his radio. Central, this is Unit 47. We have a problem here. The suspect is not cooperating. He may be a dangerous animal, he reported. Daniel's stomach nodded. That's not true. I'm not disobeying anything, he said. But the lie had already spread. And when a lie spreads, it becomes the truth. Atlas sensed Daniel's growing tension and shifted slightly. His ears flattened a bit. His eyes now locked on Miller, who was standing uncomfortably close. Control your dog, Miller shouted. He's under control, Daniel said. It doesn't seem that way to me, Miller continued. He's reacting to your aggression, Daniel said. My aggression? Miller's hand went to his holster. I'm the aggressive one? He asked. Daniel's heart was racing. He knew where this was going. He'd seen it before. Not here, but in places where the rules were different, where authority was absolute, and where resistance meant death. He knew that if he resisted, he could face anything, but the officers were really pushing it. But this wasn't a war zone. This was America. His neighborhood. His street. Atlas, stay, Daniel commanded quietly. The dog remained still. Miller's hand was on his gun. I don't like the way that dog is looking at me, he said. He's not doing anything. He's sitting. Calm down, said Daniel. Get away from the dog, Miller ordered. What? Daniel reacted. Get away from the dog, Miller ordered again, in a stern voice. Daniel's mind was racing. Every instinct told him this was wrong, but he also knew arguing would only make things worse. He had to make a choice. He took a step to the side, still holding the leash. Atlas remained seated, disciplined as always, his eyes fixed ahead. Drop the leash, Calloway ordered. Why? Daniel asked. Because I said so, Calloway replied. Daniel's jaw tightened. That's not a threat, he said. Let go. Now, came the command again. Daniel slowly lowered the leash to the ground. Atlas didn't move. Miller drew his baton. If that dog moves, he continued. He won't move, Daniel replied. Knowing what could happen to his dog, he tried to keep him under control. However, sensing the threat, Atlas shifted his weight slightly. It was an almost imperceptible movement, the kind any dog might make. But Miller saw it. There. He's moving, he said. He's not moving, Daniel shouted. Aggressive, Miller said. Daniel's hands instinctively shot up. No, not aggressive. He meant to say guard dog. But it was too late. A sudden gunshot shattered the afternoon silence. Atlas instantly collapsed, his body falling onto the grass. A pool of blood formed beneath him, spreading across the green grass like a dark, terrifying stain. Daniel's world stopped. His only confidant, his friend, lay there motionless. For a long, impossible moment, he couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Then he knelt beside Atlas, his hands trembling over the wound. No, 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 he began to scream. Atlas's eyes were open but unfocused. His breath came in short, helpless gasps. Daniel pressed his hands against the wound to stop the bleeding, but there was too much. There was too much blood. Atlas, stay with me, son, he yelled, but the light in Atlas's eyes was already fading. You shot him, Daniel yelled, his voice breaking. You shot my dog, he said. Miller stood frozen, the gun still in his hand, his face pale. Calloway's voice was cold. The animal was aggressive. We had no choice, he continued. Daniel looked at them and felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Not in war, not in the worst battles, not even in the darkest missions. It was pure, unfiltered rage. You're both dead, he said quietly. These words were not a threat. They were a statement. Atlas died in Daniel's arms 3 minutes later. Daniel pressed the wound desperately for 3 minutes. For 3 minutes, he watched life drain from the eyes that looked at him with absolute trust. For 3 minutes, he whispered words promising that everything would be okay, even though they both knew it wouldn't. When Atlas's chest stopped moving, Daniel leaned back, his hands covered in blood, and stared into the void. Daniel felt a great rage inside him. Storms were raging within him. Calloway and Miller stood a few meters away, exchanging tense glances. Miller had holstered his gun. Calloway had already reached for his radio and begun fabricating the story. Central, shots fired. Dangerous animal neutralized. No injuries to police officers or civilians, he reported. But there would be more. Neutralized. As if Atlas were a threat. As if he were something that needed to be eliminated. Daniel looked at them, a blank expression on his face. You didn't have to do that, he said. Calloway shrugged. The dog was aggressive. We followed protocol, he replied. He was sitting. He wasn't moving, Daniel said. We didn't see it that way. The police began to argue. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, blood still on his fingers. He wanted to move. He wanted to show them what 15 years of Delta Force training could do. He wanted them to understand what they had taken from him, but he didn't move, because he knew something they didn't. Violence wasn't the solution. Not yet, he told himself. Revenge required precision, planning, patience, and Daniel had plenty of all three. I want your badge numbers, Daniel said quietly. Calloway laughed. What do you want? He asked mockingly. Your badge numbers, both of yours, Daniel repeated. Miller shifted uncomfortably. Look, buddy, I'm sorry about your dog, but, he began. Your badge numbers. Now, Daniel repeated firmly. The two officers could see the fire in his eyes. Something in Daniel's voice made them pause. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something colder. Something that slightly marred Calloway's smirk. Fine, said Calloway, and gave his number. Miller did the same. Daniel memorized the numbers. Then he slowly, deliberately stood up and walked back to his house without saying a word. He heard Calloway mutter, "Crazy bastard," behind him. But Daniel wasn't crazy. He was focused. That night, Daniel sat in his home office, laptop open, files spread across the desk. Shortly after sunset, he had buried Atlas in the backyard, under the oak tree, in a simple grave. There was no ceremony. No words were spoken. Only silence, earth, and the weight of loss. Daniel's grief had grown like a mountain inside him. Now he was working. He opened every database he still had access to, some legal, some not. Military records, court documents, personnel files. He researched Gregory Calloway and Anthony Miller's pasts, following the digital traces they left behind. What they found made him clench his jaw. Calloway, 17 complaints over 8 years regarding excessive use of force, all dismissed. 3 cases quietly resolved by the city. A pattern of targeting minorities, escalating situations, and impunity. Miller, 9 complaints, 2 suspensions, both overturned by the union. Numerous witnesses who recanted their statements after being pressured. These were not isolated incidents. It was systematic, protected, supported. Whatever these 2 officers did, certain forces ensured the incidents were immediately covered up. Daniel leaned back in his chair, weighing the variables in his mind. He could expose them, gather evidence, and leak it to the press to start an investigation. But investigations took time. Men like Calloway and Miller knew how to use the system. They had done it before. They exploited every loophole in the system with ease. No, he told himself. This required something different. He took out his phone and made a call. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Carter, I wasn't expecting to hear from you," Marcus replied. "Marcus, I need you to do me a favor," Daniel said. Marcus Hayes had served with Daniel in Delta Force. He had retired a year ago and now worked as a private investigator, specializing in cases of police misconduct. "What kind of favor?" Marcus asked. Daniel explained the situation. Every detail. Atlas, the conflict, the lies, the pattern. When he finished, there was a long silence. "Those bastards," Marcus finally said. "You want me to investigate?" he asked. "As thoroughly as you can. Find everything. Every complaint. Every witness. Every incident they buried. I want a case so solid they can't breathe," Daniel replied. "Are you planning to file a lawsuit?" Marcus asked. "I plan to destroy them," Daniel answered. "Legally or?" Marcus asked again. Daniel's voice was cold. "Legally. I want them to lose everything properly, publicly, permanently." Marcus was silent for a moment. "That will take time. I have time, and it will cost. Money is not a problem." "Okay, give me 2 weeks." Marcus delivered in 10 days. The file he sent was devastating. Not just complaints, but timestamps, photos, documented incidents, and statements from confidential witnesses. People who had previously been too afraid to speak but were now eager to talk. Video footage from body cameras that had mysteriously disappeared but which Marcus had obtained through back channels. Daniel compiled everything into a comprehensive file, then he made copies. One copy went to the district attorney's office. One copy went to the FBI's Civil Rights Division. One copy went to the local newspaper. One copy went to a national civil rights organization. And one copy went directly to the police chief. The response came immediately. Within 48 hours, Calloway and Miller were suspended from duty for the duration of the investigation. Within a week, the FBI launched an official investigation. Within 2 weeks, the district attorney announced the charges: excessive use of force, falsifying reports, civil rights violations. The media picked up the story. Retired soldier exposes police brutality after dog is killed. The story spread nationwide. It went viral. Camera crews camped outside Daniel's house. Reporters wanted interviews. Daniel made one statement: "I'm not doing this for attention. I'm doing this for everyone these cops have hurt. And I'm doing this for Atlas, who died because 2 men in badges thought they were above the law." The trial lasted 6 months. Daniel attended every day, sat in the front row, silent and still. He watched as witnesses testified one after another. A young black man beaten for resisting arrest because he wanted to see the search warrant. A Latino man whose car was searched illegally 6 times in 2 years. An elderly white woman who saw Miller plant evidence during a traffic stop and was threatened to keep quiet. The defense tried to portray Daniel as vengeful, someone with an agenda, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty, on all counts. Calloway received a 15-year prison sentence. Miller received 12 years. When the verdict was read, Daniel felt nothing. There was no sense of satisfaction, no sense of victory, just emptiness. Atlas was still missing. After the trial, Daniel returned home. The neighborhood was different now. People recognized him, some thanked him, others avoided eye contact, finding the attention his case had brought uncomfortable. Daniel didn't care about any of it. 3 months after the verdict, one afternoon, Daniel stood under the oak tree in his backyard where Atlas was buried. The grave was covered with grass. Soon you wouldn't even know it was there. "I caught them, son," Daniel said quietly. "They'll never wear a badge again. They'll never hurt anyone again." The wind rustled the leaves above his head. "I know this won't bring you back. I know it won't fix anything. But at least they paid for what they did." He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, watching the grass. Finally he turned and went inside. Months passed, then a year. Daniel stayed in the neighborhood, despite everything. He became an advocate for police reform, working with organizations pushing for accountability and oversight. He testified at city council meetings. He spoke at community gatherings. He helped families who had been wronged navigate the legal system. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because he understood a fundamental truth: unchecked power destroys, and silence leads to ruin. One day, after a community meeting, a young black woman approached him. She was about 25, tense but determined. "Mr. Carter, I wanted to thank you. 2 years ago, my brother was beaten by the police. No one believed us. No one cared. But when your story came out, when people saw what you did, it gave us the courage to speak up. We filed a complaint. They're investigating now." Daniel nodded. "I'm glad. Don't let them intimidate you. Document everything. Find witnesses. Make your voice heard." "I will, because of you." After the woman left, Daniel walked to his car. On his way home, he thought about Atlas. He thought about the senseless violence that killed him. He thought about the system that had protected those responsible for so long. And he thought about all the people harmed by that same system. All the families who had lost someone. All the victims condemned to silence. Atlas's death was a tragedy, but it was also a catalyst. Change didn't happen because those in power suddenly developed a conscience. It happened because someone refused to remain silent. It happened because someone refused to allow injustice to go unpunished. Daniel was that person, and now others were finding their voices too. That evening, Daniel was standing in his backyard again. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. He knelt beside Atlas's grave and ran his hand over the soil. "I miss you, son," he said quietly. "Every day. The wind was blowing, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. But I want you to know that what happened to you had meaning. It brought them out. It was the beginning of something bigger than us. He paused for a moment, feeling the weight of it all. You are a good dog, Atlas. The best. And I promise I won't give up the fight. Not until things change. Until people like Calloway and Miller can no longer hide behind their badges. He stood up, brushing the dirt from his hands. Rest in peace, son. I'll take care of the rest. As he walked home, the last rays of the sun disappeared over the horizon. Darkness enveloped the neighborhood, but a single light shone in Daniel's house. He sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, and replied to emails from families seeking help. Each one was a story. Each one mattered. Atlas was gone. That would never change. But his death had ignited the spark of something unquenchable. Justice, accountability, change. And Daniel would spend the rest of his life ensuring that spark turned into a fire. Because that's what you do when the world takes something precious from you. You don't just mourn. You fight, and you do everything in your power to make sure it never happens to anyone else.